I know this has been a long day, and I don't want to belabor it. Thank you very much for coming to hear me. I'm going to talk about police and social control, but I'm going to do it in a somewhat biographical way. Okay, so I start off here with slavery, chattel slavery. Most people think of slavery in terms of chattel slavery, and the fact that people could be owned by other people. Okay, and the 13th Amendment, of course, made this illegal. But it turns out that you could own a person, no person could own a person, no person could be enslaved to another person, but you could be enslaved by the state. Okay, and so the 13th Amendment says that there shall not be involuntary servitude unless for a conviction. And so throughout the South, this was used to keep black people in slavery. Okay, and many thought of it as worse than slavery, because in slavery a master had to spend money to buy a slave. They were usually concerned to at least maintain the slave long enough to get their investment out of it. But the state made no investment in the people that worked for it. That's the sense in which they were acquired without cost, and they could be worked to death without any loss. Okay, so you've seen pictures or heard of chain gangs. This is how many of the roads and infrastructure of the South was built, levees, swamps drained, etc. So if you were black in the South, this was one of the principal things you had to try to avoid. Okay. Now, this is a case, so 1941 is the year I was born in. Lake County is a place in Florida, but you will see later on there's another Lake County I will talk about. But 1941, you had World War II. You had soldiers going away, many dying, many being wounded, coming back to the United States. They figured if they could fight for freedom abroad, then they could demand freedom at home. So many of the soldiers decided they didn't want to be used as they were before. And this is an example of what happened to people who were transgressed the laws of the South. Here you see this sheriff having killed these two men who were convicted, mostly because they wanted to make them an example to all the other black men around that they should not try to be what's called uppity. Okay, in my childhood, the sheriff that I know of was in Lake County, Tennessee, which was next door to my county. Okay, as I say, I never saw him, but throughout the black community there, he was renowned. Okay, and at harvest time, people, you've probably heard an old blues songs, 30 days in jail. You know, they're always singing about that. Well, sheriffs were always looking for a good reason to give people 30 days in jail, because if you went to jail, you had to work it off. There were court costs, etc., that you had to pay off, and you did that by working at almost no wages. This is a picture of Pick Haynes, the sheriff I was talking about, that was taken near my hometown. This is going to be a story about how he interacted with people around here. B.M., the principal, was an educated man. As you can see, Pick Haynes was not educated. So it was very common for uneducated law enforcement people to try to humiliate educated black people. Okay? So here's the case. A car goes by you, you see someone wave, you don't know who it is, you keep going, then he turns around, and it was Beck Hayes, and he wanted to know why a black man did not acknowledge his presence. And of course, the principal says, I didn't know it was you, I'm sorry, sorry, sorry. But you can understand from the last picture that for two people out on a road by themselves, one man is armed and is given the privilege to use lethal force. This is a law enforcement, yes, the police. They are authorized to use legal force to make arrests. Okay, so the man was afraid, okay, and he did what he was told to do, okay. And again, as you can see here, he never forgot the experience. But this is an experience that many black people had to go through in dealing with law enforcement in the South. And even today, I will tell you, I'm afraid when I'm stopped by a policeman, because he will see that I am intelligent, strong. He will want to show that he is top dog over me, and I know that I have to be extremely careful not to provoke them. Okay? Women were often in a similar situation in the South. Okay? They would be stopped by the police, given a charge, and coerced into sex. They would be groped. The policeman has to search you to make sure you don't have any weapons hidden underneath your clothes. You see, and often again, rapes were very common. Most people have heard of Rosa Parks, the lady who refused to move to the back of the bus in Atlanta and started in the Montgomery bus rides and started the civil rights movement. But you will see that she was an investigator for the NAACP, and one of the first cases, as I describe here, was a policeman who had raped a black woman. Okay, and in Memphis, Tennessee, again, another case, in another case, Richmond, Virginia. And all of these cases, the police were exonerated. Okay, this is again during the 50s and 60s when the civil rights movement was in its nascent stage, and they appealed to the United Nations that they were not getting protection. Okay, so it's only in 1965 that a white man was eventually convicted of raping a black woman, even though that had been the practice throughout slavery and afterwards. Okay, lynchings were used in the South very commonly. Usually was argued that it was white men chased after black women, but in fact it was usually to do with some kind of economics, Ida B. Wells herself was chased out of Memphis because she was too successful. A friend of hers had a store there that competed with whites, and he was too successful. And in this place here, you will see that these men were killed because they got into an economic dispute in Dyersburg. Another part of my hometown with law enforcement, again, you have ruling families there. And here, this happens very much now, small towns where you can make a deal with the local sheriff, the local district attorney, and you can fly a plane in there full of drugs and unload it. I hope many of you are aware of this. This is one reason why drugs has spread so thoroughly in small towns now, in rural America, not urban America. Because you have these corrupt officials who, make deals with drug people to allow drugs to come in. Okay, so again, this judge had been molesting women who came before him, and he was prosecuted under a law that had been designed to protect blacks. who were being having their rights violated by law enforcement. Let's see. Yes. By the way, if there's any questions as I go along that you would like to ask me about, don't hesitate to raise your hand and I'll stop and we can talk, okay? But I want to emphasize, even in my own case, the extent to which violence was always an imminent threat. Every time you saw the police, they looked at you to see whether you showed the requisite obeisance to them. And if not, they would want to know why. So I am always apprehensive when I have thought, when I have had to come in contact with the police. I have never known when one will think that they have done the world a favor by getting rid of an intelligent black man. Okay, and racial profiling, okay, driving while black, jogging while black, walking while black, being at home while black. You should be surprised. Police break down doors, you know, on a regular basis, you know, without a search warrant or anything. And the most obvious case, you may not remember, they do this not just with alleged drug people, but with academics like myself. And the example I remember is that of Henry Louis Gates. What was this, about 5, 6 years ago? He's a Harvard professor. He had just been out on an assignment. He came back home. He was going into his house there at Cambridge. And the neighbor saw him going into his house, called the police. The police came, you know, and he stepped out and they arrested him. Now, this is a man in his own house. It was so embarrassing. Not only did they arrest him, but the man who arrested him was the minority sensitivity trainer for the police, you know. So it ended up with Obama inviting the two of them to the White House for a beer. But, you know, the point is that black people are so profiled, you know, that they are always in danger of being with the police. And so not only here, but this, as you can see, this is Richard Wright, a very famous novelist talking about the South. But, you know, I have never been beaten by the police. This is the point. You see, never. But with all of this, it is as if in each of these cases, I myself could have been the victim. All right, and so this is what I say. I could have been the victim. I've been the victim of 1,000 physical assaults, sexual assaults, psychological assaults, and executions, because I know that policeman can shoot me, and more than likely, he would be exonerated, as you have seen over the last few years. Okay? What is enslavement? I do this because I want to impress you that even though chattel slavery is gone, penal slavery still exists. Okay? And it exists in the United States. By 1950, there were this approximately many, but it exists around the world. This is the thing I want to end up with. It's not just the United States. And it began during the same period as the Jim Crow South slavery did, that is penal slavery in the South. But Nazi Germany had it as a part of its plan to dominate the world, that in every country that it defeated, it would use the conquered people as forced labor. You see, so they would be interned and enslaved. Nazi Germany was not the only one. 3.5 penal slaves in the Soviet Union doing its attempt to do the same, and Communist China. So you see the use of state power to enslave people has continued even though private ownership of slaves has been made illegal in the world. Okay? Contemporary today, the United States has more enslaved penal people, penal enslavement than any other country in the world, not just in absolute numbers, but per 100,000, as you can see. So even though this might not be obvious to all of us who are not are threatened with this, there are many people for which these figures are very real in their lives. Okay, the other ones for China and Russia, as you can see, the same countries during the World War II and afterwards very much continue to use penal slavery. Okay, thank you everyone. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to discuss them with you. Anybody? You are looking at a dinosaur from another era, so you better, and it talks. Yes, please.
What are some, I saw there was a figure for percentage of women that were involved in penal slavery. What are the differences in tasks that are given based on your gender?
Difference in what?
In tasks or jobs that are given in the penal slavery system.
Oh, the jobs. Well, you know, it used to be that the jobs were on penal farms, and so the women would work out in the farm just like the men did. You know, they would have, but there weren't as many women then. They preferred men so that the men could do the hard labor. It's only recently that women have reached such high proportions, primarily with the war on drugs. You know, so, and now, of course, penal labor is prescribed because, you know, there's so much unemployment in the country among free labor that they, you know, free laborers protest using prison labor. So it is not as prevalent as it was up until through the 60s and 70s. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the rise of private prisons as a way to profit off of inmates is kind of replacing that labor that was more prominent in earlier years?
Well, certainly I think that that is one of the things that is happening. You know, by privatizing prisons, then you provide jobs for people in small towns. So there are some places where the prison is the only job within 30 or 40 miles for people. So it does provide them with jobs. It also gives them more clout in government because the prisoners are counted in the vicinity in which the prison is, but they are not able to vote. You see, so that means that the representatives get more, that you get more representatives in Congress from places like that. You know, so there are a lot of ways that prisons are made to pay off now. One way, of course, again, is to reduce black involvement in the labor force. You see, because if you've been convicted, then there are many jobs you can get. It also reduces the number of blacks who go to college using Pell Grants and other federal assistance. So again, that reduces the number of competitors for the available resources. You know, so there are a lot of pluses for people putting people in jail. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Around which decade was there involvement of black people in the police force?
Oh, that only came after the civil rights movement of the 60s. Otherwise, all of the police forces all around the country were all white. Now, in the north, of course, you had a lot of Irish because you had ethnic groups in the north who got control of much of the city government. But in the south, they had to have federal involvement in order for the law enforcement to be integrated in the south. You know, so they had to bring suit against almost every state in the South in order for it to integrate its state troopers and then down to the lower levels, the county levels, and the municipal levels. But in the South, there were no black people before I would say before the Civil Rights Movement. The 1965 to 1970 is when integration of police forces really began. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have a question?
So in terms of modern day police training, what are some of the biases that prevented modern day police training?
What are some of the what?
The biases?
Biases?
Yeah.
I don't think it's just, these are biases that are held by the general population. You know, anywhere I go, people keep an eye on me. I might be a criminal, just an intelligent one. You know what I mean? Which makes it even worse. You know what I mean? As Ruth Simmons says, they keep an eye on her when she walks through stores. You know, Oprah Winfrey, they keep an eye on her because they think, what are you doing in here? You see what I mean? So for most police, they want to assume that I'm doing something illegal. Now, my fear is that they would prove that I was doing something illegal simply by putting some drugs in my car. They do that very often, they say, hey, what's this under your seat? What do you mean? And they pull out a lot of drugs. What am I to do? You know, even if I am exonerated, look at my reputation. You see? So a lot of people are ruined just in this way. You know, even if you are charged and you are not convicted, the charge still remains a public record. Everyone know that? So they can go on the internet and see that I was charged with a drug offense. What if I'm applying for a job at Smith and they find that? Forget it. Yes, please.
Do you have any hope for any kinds of remedies or any way to change the dynamic of the situation?
Yes, I do think so. I think that the Black Lives Matter movement, I just couldn't believe it. It was such an opening for me. I had never thought that the police would smile at me when they saw me. That had never happened before the Black Lives movement. Before then, most police, when they looked at me, it was a measuring up. You know how dogs do when they walk around one another. Who's the top dog? And every time a policeman stopped me, I could feel that energy. And I'd be scared. But now, since Black Lives Matter and all of the cell phone has been the biggest thing that has made the difference. The cell phone, and being able to record exactly what's going on. Because otherwise it's my word against his word in every case. And the fewer people around, the better for him. You see what I mean? So I say the cell phone has just made an extraordinary difference. And also recognition of implicit bias. The fact that this officer says, I'm not prejudiced, I have black friends, doesn't mean a thing. You see, he still may look at me and feel like he's got to prove something, when he confronts me. And that's to my detriment more than his. Mm-hmm.
I don't think this is a question.
Please.
A little louder.
Okay, so
What
this
do
is
you
actually,
say?
Okay, so early this morning, I live like way off campus now. I rent from an Ada in Chicopee. And so I had to drive from Chicopee here this morning to make sure I did my intern work at the Poetry Center, then go back home to get myself together. On the way back home, I had that incident with a white officer at a traffic light. So you mentioned cell phones, and I was thinking, I'm also a Christian, but Jesus didn't come to mind. The first thing that came to mind was the talk that you have with your children of how they're supposed to act. And I thought, the talk came to me immediately, and I thought about, I'm alone here away from my family, because my family's in Maryland. If I react the way I would like to, I risk a ticket, an arrest, a hell of an ass whooping, probably jail or death. And no one is gonna notice that I'm not missing, for a long time. And so when I was choosing what school I was gonna come to after my community college experience, I had a lot of friends who kind of laughed at me when I was like, wait, put the map up, the US map, where's that school? Oh, nope. Like some things I just wrote off. But it was interesting this morning that I had to get myself together to come and do the duties I had to do today. So I had to ride past that officer a second time, and I was hoping he didn't remember my truck with my Maryland tags or anything, because this is so real. And I thought, no one's gonna know. So a cell phone would have been important, but I think, and I don't want to offend anyone, but not even people of color, I'm gonna say black people, anywhere, you should be Facebook Live all the damn time, get you a hell of a battery, have that GoPro camera going or something. Somebody, I was just so freaked out, my family would not know what was going on. And that's some scary shit, 8 a.m. in the morning.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. This is one of the things that I did mention there, but I think it should be reiterated, and that is not only just physical assaults, people getting whooped, beat by the police, shot by the police, they're groped by the police, gotta search you, but the psychological assault. They want to humiliate you. They want to see you grovel in front of them. They want you to acknowledge that they have it over you. Now, black people have served that purpose for a long, long time. Now, I'll tell you another thing. It's not just black people. When I taught in Ohio, I had a lot of poor white friends, and they say, we don't have no NAACP when the police whoop up on us. And poor whites are often in that same situation. People who live in the Ozarks, the mountains are way out. The police prey on them. So generally, what kind of people go into policing? You have to ask. There is a sadistic pleasure that you can get from seeing someone who's afraid of you and groveling in front of you. All of us have that. We don't usually, use it, get people, but you have to acknowledge that that is a human possibility, just like sexual, The officer gropes you and then they will use you. Beatings. They enjoy beating people, So, often people go into police work who want to have that kind of power over others. I don't say this is all of the time. I think that more who don't have that inclination should go into police work. Everyone follow what I mean? I think that they should, because right now most police come from the lowest levels of society. When I worked in prison, the prison guards usually had no more better education than the prisoners. They didn't. And they resented the prisoners getting a college education when they didn't have one. They resented it very much. Well, I can understand where they're coming from. You know, this is the only job they can get, is being a prison guard or policeman. You know. So, you know, you just have to be aware that you're going to be dealing with people with those kind of psychological propensities. And for me, I just have to be on my P's and Q's all the time. You know?
In a better world, what do you imagine police being, or do you imagine that they don't need to exist?
No, you know, this has been a big issue, you know. I think that police are there to use force in order to maintain law and order, put it that way. So if you're breaking the law and you refuse to stop, you know, what is supposed to happen? You see what I mean? If I'm robbing somebody and I refuse to decease, then what is supposed to happen? The police are there to deal with those kinds of events. But you do have unnecessary force and excessive force being used in order to detain people. Unnecessary. So groping is unnecessary. You don't have to feel between people's legs and all between their butts. You see what I mean? Just to know that they don't have a gun stuck in the, you know, underneath their clothes, but they do it just for the fun of it, you know, or maybe. So I think that, you know, getting people in there who don't go in for the wrong reasons. Of course, everybody needs to make a living, but lots of people are not out to make other people uncomfortable or lord it over. I think more college people like you should go into policing. You follow me? Just to say, I want to be I want to be someone who helps rather than intimidates. I love that. Please.
Could you speak to the current policies that are in place to help educate officers on inherent bias?
Yes, well, it's definitely making a difference because I can see the officers are much, as I said, are much nicer to me now. I can't believe it. They smile at me when they stop me. I say, whoa. And they try to make sure that they're nice. You know, I guess they think I might have a cell phone camera running on them, you know, which is possible, you know what I mean? But clearly they have been put on notice, you know, by all of the shootings and beatings and assaults that have been recorded, that, hey, even if this guy's not recording, what about that person over there that I'm not looking at? They may be recording it, and I hope you are. Everyone follow me? I certainly hope you are. You know, because I think that has made a huge difference. Police departments then get sued for assaults like this. You know, the city will start making sure that their training, you know, keeps them from making these kinds of mistakes. Mm-hmm.
I have three thoughts. One is that I was in Ireland twice now, and in Ireland, police officers come out when they are called by a civilian who needs them. Otherwise, they stay within the boundaries of their barracks.
Mm-hmm.
And the juxtaposing that with what I experienced here in the States gave me a very different, I find it really useful to look at how other countries
Yes, very much.
are doing things. And I came back here and have a whole new perspective on this country and what a police state we have.
Yes.
Just was, you know, the sense of that, but the juxtaposition was incredible. To think that there's nobody out there looking for you to break the law.
Yes.
The law. That's not their job. Their job is to wait until somebody needs you. And it was quite profound. The other thing is I will beg to differ with you that police are to create law and order. I think that they're very much here to protect the wealthies, the holdings of the wealthy, and to maintain an unequitable economic system.
Yes.
And I'd like to think it's law You see, like, my father was a civil rights lawyer, and he said one day he watched a man get prosecuted for embezzling like $10,000 or $15,000, and he got a little slap on the wrist and told by the judge that he should probably, he and his family should just leave town for a while. And the next person on in the court that day was a woman who had stolen a can of tuna fish, and she was fined $200 or given 10 days in jail. That's not law and order.
Well, let me tell you what I mean by law and order. In the United States, this is a capitalist country in which we have private property. And you may be starving, but you cannot come in my house and get my food. You understand what I mean? I can call the police on you. And you can say, well, you got all that food in the fridge, you're just going to throw it out in the garbage? Well, wait till it gets to the garbage, please. I'm kidding you, everybody. But you understand, this is the law of a capitalist country. You know, so you will see many who have much more than they can use, but you still do not have any rights to get it. And so that's what creates this inequality. You know, law and order means that those who have property can keep their property. That's what law and order here means. Now, I don't think that that is right. I would love to see inheritance laws dissolved. That would solve all of the problems. You know, you can keep what it is you make, but once you die, it goes into the pot. And then others will get to draw on it, and not just your own children and those you designate. Everyone follow what I mean? That would solve a lot of problems. Have you heard anybody mentioning it? Mm-mm. Hey, there you go. But inheritance is a huge problem because all of the disparities of wealth that comes from slavery, segregation, and every other form of expropriation, you know, means that it has accumulated to the top so that those who have get richer and those who don't have get poorer. Now, you need a police state in order to maintain that. You need a police state. Now, don't forget, on the other hand, it's not just capitalism. Remember, I had Russia and China there, who were socialist countries. Theirs was to initiate a revolution, you know, that would destroy private property. But in doing that, they destroyed a lot of people. So you could be convicted and sent to the gulags and work in Siberia till you die. That's just a slave. You see, and the same with communist China. You know, people will be worked to death. So I think that it's going on. It's still a lot of this happening, you know, that is driven by the state, you know, that we need to look at. Please.
I just had a question about your personal experience. You said that you had worked in a prison at some point?
Yes.
Can you talk about what it was like for you to be in that environment? Or?
I worked in prison about 20 years because I felt committed. I felt that there but for the grace of God go I. You know, I could easily myself have been imprisoned. I'm very intelligent. I could have easily made money in the drug trade or whatever, you know what I mean, until I got busted, which most people usually do. So it's most of the people in prison, you know, they are very intelligent, but they were risk takers, you know, and they took risks making the biggest amount of money that they could, trading drugs. So they get busted. Okay, so they come to prison. What did they do? Many of them looked at prison as a kind of, vacation from the streets. You know, and get off a lot of stress, and they took courses. Many of them extremely bright, just as intelligent as the people I was teaching in my regular classes, you know. And so there you get to see that there's not that, you know, stupid people go to jail and intelligent people go to college. It's not true, okay? But in jail, many of them were very happy to have me there. One guy says, "Thank you for keeping my brain from going dead in here," you know, because otherwise they have nothing to do. I say 90% of the people in jail have a 4th grade reading level. Now, why aren't they required to get their GED while they're in jail? Everyone follow what I mean? There is no education. The Clinton crime bill stopped all money for higher education in prisons. That's why I stopped going. You see, they could no longer pay for their education. The Pell Grants is usually what they used in order to pay for their, and once those were gone, the courses all dried up. Okay? But as I said, I found the prisoners to be just as intelligent as my students outside, and as I mentioned again, I found that the guards were extremely resentful. So you had to be careful of where you say, how you say things, you know. There's a lot of politics in prison. You've got the Aryan Nation, you've got the Nation of Islam, you've got the Hispanic groups, you've got the Christian groups, There are a lot of factions there that you have to manipulate. And here's the other thing I remember most about prison. I guess the guards inside the prisons do not have weapons. Did all of you know that? They do not carry weapons on them. So you have probably about 1 guard for every 200 prisoners. So if something happens, the guards don't have a chance. They know that. So they're often making deals with the prisoners, you know what I mean, in order to make sure that if something happens, they have someone who will look out for them. This is why you get so much drugs in the prisons. The prisons are full of drugs because they are smuggled in, usually by the guards. But you have to not place the blame on guards. Put yourself in that situation. If a prisoner who's in there for murder tells you what your house number is, how many children you have, where they go to school, where they go to church, and they tell you they want you to do something, you're going to take it seriously. And especially if they're in the Aryan Nation. Because they have enforcers outside. All of them do. Everyone understand me? So the guards are themselves under threat. Serious threat. If something goes down, who will they turn to? What about their family outside? Are they putting their family in jeopardy by not helping you? So it's a very place full of many landmines. Anyone, please?
So in addition to losing access to Pell Grants, in addition to losing opportunities for jobs, in addition to losing maybe the right to thrive, in addition to losing public housing for them and their family, are there other things, such an insidious system, so are there other things that I haven't mentioned or that you can think of that prisoners who have done their time then also lose?
Well, those are quite a few, I would say that, the loss of voting rights have cost a number of elections. That is a very serious one, and there are many states in which, people who come out of prisons are no longer able to vote. You see, so that has been another payoff for those who are in power, because, in the South, most of those people get elected by excluding the black vote, and that is still going on. How can we limit the black vote? How can we limit the Hispanic vote? You see, easily by making them felons. How can we keep them out of the labor market? Easy, by making them felons. These people who have been in jail, even when they go back to their communities, they are nothing but liabilities then. They can't get work, they have no respect. What are they supposed to do? Many of them feel like they're better off in jail. And that is horrible. but they feel like they are better off in jail. You know what they call it? 3 hots and a cot. That's the term in the ghetto. 3 hots and a cot. It's better than, and you get health care. It's better than being out here sleeping under a bridge. Okay. Anyone else? Anything I can talk about or we can talk about? Please.
What do you think of the decriminalization of the possession and or trade of drugs as a potential solution?
Listen, most of the drugs, I won't say most, you have to get the exact figures, but most of the drug arrests were for marijuana. That's the trick. Most of the drug arrests before decriminalization was for marijuana. You see, so that's again what I said. You know, what if this officer puts a bag of marijuana and then arrests me 5 years ago? I lose my job because it's a federal offense. Smith College would lose all of its federal money by keeping me around. Everyone follow what I mean? So, you know, so many people have, just from marijuana possession, been imprisoned and put into this. You know, that's one big thing about decriminalization. And it's still a federal offense. Marijuana is still a federal offense. The feds can come to you. They did it in Amherst. It was so ridiculous. This 80-year-old woman had marijuana plants she was growing for her arthritis, and the feds raided her. So it's so ridiculous. But I think that's a major part of it, you see, is that, and also athletes. Athletes get hurt, they get injuries. Marijuana has been shown to be a good remedy for this, but instead they had to take things like cocaine and heroin because marijuana stays in your blood 30 days. So if you are tested, you are out again. Cocaine, heroin, 2 days and it's out. You follow what I'm saying? So you put people in these situations where they are made to break the law. They are put in a position where breaking the law is their, best option at the moment. So a lot of football players and athletes have come out, about this because the opioid addiction epidemic itself, you see, is part of this. Painkillers. Please.
So earlier you were talking about the cell phone and how you think that's...
Say that again now?
Sorry. Earlier you were talking about the cell phone and how you think that's been a big influencer on the relationship between Black people and Jews in the country. But when you think of an event in Baltimore where a police officer was literally caught on his own body cam putting drugs into somebody's car.
Horrible, isn't it?
But it was ridiculous. And
Did he go to jail for it?
I don't think he was indicted or anything. I think he had to take an apology and what was it, bias? But it was ridiculous. And it's kind of, I don't think it made national news, I can't remember, but it was very big in Baltimore over the summer. Did it? I was away in the woods all summer, but I remember my friends writing me, this crazy thing happened, you'll never believe it.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. But I think between the cell phones and the body cams, it's starting to become like a surveillance state. And I've just been thinking a lot about not to get all academic, but Foucault and the panoptic surveillance and them and all these things. And do you see that becoming a reality for this situation?
Well, the thing is that Foucault's idea of is that the government would be, using these surveillance tools to control the population. But in this case, it is in the hands of individuals, not the government. That's the big difference, you see. And it's in order to liberate people from government oppression. So I think it's a good thing, that we have this kind of surveillance technology. If you see something happening in your neighborhood, it doesn't have to be the police. Just turn on your camera and record it. That will make people think twice who's got their camera on me? You never know. You see, so I think that that would be a huge deterrent. Mhm. Please.
Do you think things would change if the force became less white?
Not really. I've had black police scare the hell out of me too, you know what I mean? They do the same things often. Sometimes they want to prove that their white colleagues, that they are just as tough as their white colleagues. So you, I don't put much faith in just having a black face holding the gun. You follow what I mean? Yeah, and I really don't, unfortunately. Mm-hmm.
It seems like from what you're saying that police brutality is just a symptom of the issue. It's police are perpetuating a violent system, they're not creating it. And it seems like in the mainstream, while there is like another conversation that's deeper and more full, but in the mainstream it feels like the conversation is a lot about just the police as the point of issue. And do you think that that distracts from a larger issue, that we're not actually talking about the fact that it's coming from much higher and much...
Absolutely, I certainly agree. It's not just the police. The police enforce social control. They don't create it. You see, so it's governments and people's expectations that they are trying to confirm. You know, so I think that we need to look at it. In the South, they needed people to work on the fields and work on the roads and, you know, all of that, you know. In Nazi Germany, they worked in the war-producing factories, and they would work their prisoners to death, producing war goods. Likewise in the Soviet Union and Communist China. All of these now, North Korea. These are police states, but the governments that they are enforcing, you know, are repressive. And so the South was repressive. Blacks had no rights, you know, in the Jim Crow South. Now that has changed with the Civil Rights Movement. You know, but I think that the issue of income inequality is growing. And so long as it grows, it's going to create more tensions among those who are at the bottom. So whites will blame blacks, and blacks will blame whites, and Hispanics will blame Asians. And, you know, everyone will be fighting against one another without noticing that the real culprit is there's just not enough to go around. Mm-hmm.
I think it's also important to note that, like, it's not always police officers that are on duty. Like, I've been harassed by police officers when they were off duty.
They're even worse.
And they, like, will, like, I've been groped by men who then acknowledged that they were officers and, like, kind of made me feel like I couldn't say anything because they had a badge.
Yeah, I know.
And it's just, like, you always have to be, like, aware of, like, you're always at a risk, even if they're not wearing a uniform on. And like that uniform almost in a way protects you because it means that someone else sees that too.
Yes, exactly. If they're not wearing a uniform, no one will notice. Please.
So you began this question and answer period by saying, so we've got a dinosaur before you. Go ahead, ask away. He can talk, he can answer from a place of wisdom and experience. So my question to you is, if this is a pretty serious problem, you've been paying attention to it for a long time, what can we do? Are we looking for socialist candidates? Do we need to pay attention to economic distribution of wealth? Do we need to
Absolutely.
be all join the police force? What is it?
Well, you know, I'm a pragmatist, and so I think that all of these things are accomplished step by step by step. Getting rid of the war on drugs is important for a lot of people. Now I have less fear that they will, you know, slip some marijuana under my seat because it's, you know, it's decriminalized now. You know, maybe they'll put some heroin there, some cocaine, you know what I mean? But at least not marijuana. You see what I mean? Even those drugs, now people are on notice so that the police do these kinds of things. The cell phones, I think, is just wonderful around the world. You know, will make governments much more concerned about the citizenry and what their city. As long as it's in secret, then they get away with everything. The secret police, you get away with everything. But once it becomes public, you know, every government knows that they cannot repress everyone. You see what I mean? You can't do it. So I think that individuals who feel that they cannot just stand by, you know, not be an onlooker, but, you know, take your cell phone out at least and, you know, photograph, video what's going on. That is a form of involvement. You see, even if you're not putting your own life at risk, you see what I mean? That is a form of involvement, and so I think that has made I think that has had more than anything else the biggest impact since the civil rights marches. When people saw those dogs and hoses and how they were being used on people, it was transformative. And I think the same thing is happening with cell phones. When you see someone being shot in the back, when you see someone sitting in their car being shot with their hands up, I think that you know, people will no longer ignore these issues. Please.
There's a debate going on in Northampton about whether the police want to put in more cameras, and many people are saying, you know, that's too much surveillance. Other people, the police are saying it will help deter crime, and other people are saying it's going to help also check on the police as well. I'm wondering what your thoughts are.
Well, again, I think that the more people who use their cell phone and are encouraged to use their cell phone would mean that the police don't need all that surveillance. Everybody's walking around knowing that they're expected to, you know, get involved with anything that looks wrong. Just do the video. If it doesn't come up again, you can erase it. But if it does come up again, you can use it. You see, and that phone can store a lot of videos. Everyone follow what I mean? So that has made the police nervous. Now again, I don't think that we need all of the police surveillance, you see, in public spaces, because everybody's got surveillance equipment right on them.
I mean, I can say, like, I worked with the New York City Law Department, and I can't even tell you how many cases there were, like, little video clips that were brought in, and it really helped with making the police officers responsible for their actions, as well as the city, because they had a responsibility to then punish the police officers.
Yes, and they're faced with suits.
Yeah, so it really does help.
Money counts to the governments. You know? Okay, everyone, thank you very much.